This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Jeff Whitworth, K-State crop entomologist, begins today's show with reminders about soybean pests that growers might be seeing in their field. Continuing the show is K-State's Rodrigo Onofre and Kansas Grain Sorghum's Maddy Meier as they discuss their new program, Sorghum Connection. They discuss what they hope to bring to sorghum growers. Douglas County Extension Horticulture and Natural Resources Agent Dr. Sharon Ashworth ends the show previewing the August 7th K-State Garden Hour on establishing a more environmentally sustainable lawn. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Thursday show talking about pests and soybeans. And to talk about it, we're joined by K-State crop entomologist Jeff Whitworth. Jeff, thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. Anytime. My pleasure.
Jeff, first wanting to mention Dectes stem borer.
You know, Dectes stem borer, and a little bit quick history. Prior to 1985, Dectes stem borers were in sunflowers. They would cause problems occasionally because of their boring up and down inside sunflowers and actually the girdling they do of sunflowers. But after 1980, and I don't know why, I get this question a lot, after 1985, they transitioned into soybeans, and we started finding Dectes in soybeans. As a matter of fact, we have a really hard time finding Dectes in sunflowers. But they are native to Kansas, so they are in wild sunflowers. Well, according to the literature, again, we have a hard time finding them in wild sunflowers, but they're all over in soybeans, really in about the western two-thirds of the state. They're in the eastern third, but they really don't cause a problem. But in the western two-thirds, they have been since 1985. The deal with the stem borer, they generally become adults right around the 4th of July. Then they spend a couple of weeks aggregating, congregating, whatever you want to call it, around soybean fields on the weed. I mean, they can be packed in the weeds. What they're doing is mating. Then they'll fly out every occasionally, the females especially, and they go out in the soybean fields and they lay eggs. The problem with the soybean stem borer is, and we've put out trials in the past, you can kill them, but the problem is these adults are laying eggs from for about now till the end of August in soybeans. So if you treat your field, you got to treat it about every 2 weeks because they're very mobile. They fly all around. They're in and out of different soybean fields, and they insert their eggs in the soybean stem. That's the problem. So what we've tried to do is time it so you can kill the adults, which is really a problem, like I said, because they're so mobile. And the adults will fly to a field, and they crawl under leaves, but they're inserting their eggs into the stem. So once they've inserted that egg into the stem, it's inaccessible to insecticides. The insecticides we use are contact insecticides. It doesn't come in contact with the larva because the egg hatches inside the stem, the larva stays inside the stem and bores up and down inside the plant. Now, in about another, right around the first, second, third week in August, as these eggs start hatching, the growers will start noticing, you get a petio or a leaf here or there in your soybeans, and it kills it. That tunneling inside that stem kills that little petio or that little leaf. And so as you start looking, you'll see a dead leaf here, a dead leaf there. And then that progresses until mid-September with these larvae tunneling, boring, feeding inside that stem. And as wherever those eggs were laid at those petios, they all head eventually down towards the base of the plant. The thing about the Dectes, they're cannibalistic. Once they run into each other, they will kill each other, and there will only be one at the base of the plant. And that generally is just about, just unfortunately a week or two before the beans are mature enough to harvest. And once they get down to the base of the plant, they have this characteristic, unique behavior of girdling around the inside of the stem. So that girdling doesn't really bother the plant until you get some wind. You get some wind and the plant will blow over and it will lodge. Therefore, generally speaking, it's pretty much lost to harvest. One of the curious things It doesn't make sense, but we've never been able to show yield loss due to the tunneling of the larva inside the plant. Even though the growers are out there looking and they got a whole bunch of what looks like dead plants, if it occurs after bean set, after pod set, it doesn't interrupt, it doesn't, reduce yield very much. Now, it will a little bit, but not nearly what you would think. It's that where the larvae actually get down to the base of the plant, girdle the stalk of the plant, and it falls over. That's where we get the yield loss. It's really when you look at a plant or field that has lodging, it's really a sick feeling. That's the deal with the decties. The problem with that, we don't have any management strategies. We have insecticides that kill them, but you have to spray every 2 weeks for about 5 different times because, like I said, they're out laying eggs, depositing eggs in stems of plants from now until at least mid-September, till the plants are they senesce too much for the larvae to survive inside. So you just can't afford to do it. We can control them, but it's just financially not feasible. So the only other management strategy we have is check your fields from now through September. Watch those plants as those petioles start dying. If you have fields that are 50 to 60% infested, try and harvest those fields first as they mature, as they become ready to harvest in the fall before, you get that girdling and you get that wind and it blows the plants over and you lose that. Again, they're only in the western 2/3 of the state. Why that is, again, we don't know because they're in the southern part of the U.S., but they're just not a problem in the eastern third of the state. So that's the deal with the Dectes stem borer.
Jeff, what about for soybean aphids?
Soybean aphids are an introduced pest. They've come into Kansas every year since 2002, 2003. Every year we get soybean aphids. Right about now, mid to late July through August. There's been 2 or 3 years since then that they've been in enough densities that we've had to spray some fields for them. The problem with the soybean aphid is you got to keep sampling and you got to watch the weather. Fortunately, I guess, in Kansas we have warm, hot summertime temperatures. So these are cool weather insects. So they keep coming in. If we happen to have a week or two cool weather, and by that I mean, the temperatures below 90 degrees, 85, 90 degrees, the soybean aphid will rapidly increase in size in their populations, and they can cause a lot of wilting in soybeans, especially under dry conditions. So if you got cool, dry conditions, soybean aphids, you got to get out and monitor for them because they can increase populations rapidly. They're feeding on the plant. They're competing with the plant for moisture. So you need to get out and check those out. Like I said, every year they've been here since 2002. They haven't been a problem just because normally Kansas is really hot in the summer when they get here. But further north, in the northern part of the state, in Nebraska, up in Minnesota, Wisconsin, those kind of places, they're a little more of a problem year after year. It's just that we have hot, dry conditions that's not allowed their populations to increase. The easiest way that I have found that we find them every year is if you're out looking in your soybeans and you see ants in the canopy. You just find ants crawling around on the leaves. Those ants are there for one reason, because they found an aphid colony, a soybean aphid colony, and they're feeding on the honeydew. A lot of people think, ants, they're eating the aphids. They're not. They're actually, it's really kind of a neat situation. They're tending the aphids because they feed on the honeydew produced by the aphids. And it's much easier to find the ants than is the aphids when they first start, because when they first start, a lot of times they're on the underneath side of the leaf, but somehow those ants, there can be 4 aphids on a leaf out in the middle of a field, and there'll be ants finding them. I don't know how they do it, but they're amazing at finding soybean aphid colonies. So if you're out monitoring, it's cool weather, you're worried about soybean aphids, look for ants in the canopy, and they will lead you to the aphids.
Jeff, any other pests that producers might want to be watching for in their fields?
Yes, again, soybeans and sorghum, the 2 crops right now we've worried about. And I have not had any reports yet, but we should start getting sugarcane aphids or sorghum aphids in our sorghum. I'm sure they're here already. I'm sure just in the southern part of the state, because, again, they don't overwinter in Kansas. They blow in or they fly in from the south. I'm sure we have some in Kansas already. I've just not heard of any. The other pests in the corn earworms starting to develop. they will pupate, and they will leave, and they will go to soybeans, and they will go to sorghum, because a lot of the corn around the state is going to be too far along, too mature for the corn earworm to affect. So as they pupate out of these ears, and they'll pupate in the ground, as they pupate, they'll fly to sorghum, and sorghum, again, they will be the ragworms that get in the whorl. If they're in the whorl of sorghum, please do not treat them. I know it rags up the plant, therefore the name. We worry about that a lot. Growers can see that just driving down the road. But really, we've never been able to show a yield loss to ragworm damage. And also, two other things. By the time you notice it on the leaves, the larvae have finished feeding. They've crawled down the plant, and they're pupating. And also, if you treat, the insecticide doesn't get down into the bottom of the whorl where it needs to be to kill the insects. So there's two reasons not to treat for ragworms, but the main reason is it's not going to affect yield. But then those will take off and fly to sorghum and or soybeans. If they're in soybeans, when their pods are being set, those same larvae will feed on the pods, and that's going to bother the marketable product, or they can feed on the sorghum head, and that will cause serious problems to the marketable product, the kernel and sorghum. So this time of year, right now we're kind of at a lull, but you need to keep monitoring for various pests that will be coming on in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and hopefully we'll get some rain.
Jeff, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Yes, my pleasure. Anytime.
That was K-State crop entomologist Jeff Whitworth. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show talking about Sorghum Connection with K-State row crop plant pathologist Rodrigo Onofre and Director of Communications and Outreach for Kansas Grain Sorghum, Maddy Meier. Rodrigo, Maddy, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us over.
Yeah, excited to be here and explain a little bit more about what Sorghum Connection's about.
So what is this collaboration for Sorghum Connection?
Yeah, so Sorghum Connection is in its inaugural year, and this is a partnership between the Kansas Grain Sorghum Commission, a K-State Department of Plant Pathology, and K-State Research and Extension. And so this program aims to improve ability to manage stock rot through fungicide and cropping system practices in Kansas.
So, Rodrigo, how did this come about?
So Sorghum Connection comes in right into the needs of our growers, right? I think that's the main thing behind here is just to bring information that's out there back to the farm, right? So that's where this partnership with the commission is phenomenal for us and for our growers too, where they're investing their dollars, but it's also coming back through these multidisciplinary events that we'll have.
And so with this, Rodrigo, Kansas Grain Sorghum Commission, how did it really come about creating this Sorghum Connection partnership?
So one of two reasons, starting with number one, being able to combat stock rot, one of the most common diseases that our producers face that can cause a yield loss up to 50%, I believe, Rodrigo.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Rodrigo's team here will be able to help combat stock rot through different trials in the fields. And so being able to also bring forth a new generation of producer panel days, being able to get that information to producers in a hands-on way that will really benefit them in their operations.
Yeah, and we hire a very eager student to try to answer some of those questions. Leticia Vieira, she has been working hard to trying to answer some of those questions through cropping system, fungicides at planting later on as well. And we have trials in 3 locations this year in Bavaria, Dighton, and Russell as well, which we hope to tie it up with some large field school days as well.
And can you tell us a little bit about those large field school days that will be happening in those 3 locations?
So we'll have 3 field days, right? In every location where we have a trial this year, we're lucky enough to work with our extension agents. We're scheduling and growers as well. We'll have 3 field days, one on September 4th in Bavaria, September 11th in Dighton, and September 18th in Russell, Kansas. So the main idea for the field days, again, is to bring information to our growers. So we have confirmed Lucas Hag, who will be talking about some of his latest research. Leticia, my student, and I will be there, talk about our fungicide, stock rot management, and what to do for the next season. We also have, I would say, a really good number of hybrids that are being tested, planted out there, and are going through all this heat and drought for some of the locations. So if you're thinking about a next year hybrid, definitely make sure to come to our field days to check them out. We'll have some cropping system. And again, going back to the stock rots, plant population, row spacing, a lot of those questions we'll be trying to answer at the field days.
There are more educational experiences taking place with Sorghum Connection. However, maybe once it gets a little bit cooler outside.
Yeah, so to be able to tie the information gained through these field days in September, we're also going to be hosting some winter schools as well, and those will be December 4th, 5th, and 6th in Salina, Hayes, and Garden City, respectively.
Those are going to be very exciting winter schools, and we have confirmed Brent Bean for some of them. He's going to be in Hayes and as well as in Garden City on the 5th and the 6th. So Brent Bean, he's the United Sorghum Chekhov Program agronomist, right? And I think he will bring a lot to the table to maximize that yield. We have weed control, some of the chinch bug questions that's out there right now, and growers are facing problems. So we're going to be there again, talk about some of the yield results from the trials, as well the fungicide results that we're testing right now, and cropping systems too. So there are a lot more into the winter schools. It's still in the program, and we're still planning on it, planning a grower panel, Flash and Dash, what we call like a research update, where folks are going to have 5 minutes based on students and postdocs that are working with Chekhov dollars and bringing, again, back that information to our growers. So it's going to be a very exciting kind of like winter schools that we're putting together. This, again, partnership with Plant Pathology and Kansas Grain Sorghum Commission.
For people who are interested in this, is there a way to get registered, or what does that look like?
While registration is not live currently, the Kansas Grain Sorghum website is full of resources, and you'll have to check out our social media and our podcast as well. On social media, you can find us at Kansas Sorghum, and you can also follow us through our podcast platform, which is the Sorghum State Podcast, and those episodes are uploaded twice or even more monthly.
So as we're talking about these large field days and winter schools for Sorghum Connection, what makes the both of you excited?
I think just knowing that these are a new generation of field days. You know, they're put on for farmers by farmers. So meaning that farmers are able to decide what topics are being presented at these field days in schools, what topics, what speakers, and, you know, just being able to converse with farmers and connect with them, talking about some of the most crucial issues that are impacting yields, I think will really be exciting, and being able to collaborate with the Sorghum Connection team has also been really exciting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I second everything there, Maddy. I think for me, too, is, again, being able to answer the questions that our growers are asking us and bringing that back to a data-driven extension. I think that's my passion, and one of the things that I enjoy the most is just bring back that information to our growers that are investing those dollar signs on research, right?
That was K-State row crop plant pathologist Rodrigo Onofre, and he was joined by the Director of Communications and Outreach for Kansas Grain Sorghum, Maddy Meier, as they discussed Sorghum Connection. I will put a link in today's show notes if you'd like to learn more about Sorghum Connection. Before we cut to a break, I'm now going to let you know about a survey that's taking place and a few events that are happening around the state. The first one I'd like to tell you about is the K-State survey of cotton growers for their perspective. Responses will help guide cotton research and extension programming at K-State to meet the priorities and concerns of cotton growers. Survey results will potentially be used as justification when seeking funding for research and extension programming for cotton in Kansas. Responses may be shared within K-State Extension Cotton Working Group and used for quantitative and qualitative analysis to develop extension bulletins, presentations, and scientific journal articles. Respondents will have the option to provide their contact information for potential follow-up phone conversations and field visits. However, identities will be kept confidential outside the K-State Extension Cotton Working Group. Participant information, even if identities are removed, will not be used or distributed for future research studies. This survey should take less than 10 minutes. I will link it in today's show notes on acttoday.net. The first meeting I'd like to let you know about is the Winter Canola Meeting. The first one is taking place August 6th in Harper, Kansas, and the second one's taking place August 7th in Enid, Oklahoma. They do ask that you RSVP for these meetings. You can RSVP for the one taking place August 6th in Harper, Kansas by reaching out to the Harper County Extension Office. If you'd like to RSVP for the August 7th one happening in Enid, Oklahoma, you can do so by getting in contact with Ron at 405-780-0113, or you can get in contact with Josh at 405-361-6941. And of course, if you have any other questions, you can reach out to K-State canola breeder Mike Stamm at mjstamm@ksu.edu. Some other upcoming field days is one that is called the 2024 Kansas River Valley Experiment Field Day. That's taking place Tuesday, August 13th at 5 p.m. at the Roseville Experiment Field. This is a free event and pre-registration is requested for the catered barbecue meal. To register, please call Casey Beck at the Shawnee County Extension Office at 785-232-0062. They ask that you pre-register for this event by 5 p.m. on Monday, August 12th. Another field day that's taking place is happening Wednesday, August 21st at 9 a.m., which is the 2024 East Central Experiment Field Day that is happening at the Ottawa Experiment Field. This is a free event and no pre-registration is required. Registration will begin at 9 a.m. with coffee and donuts provided, and the program will begin at 9:30. There will also be lunch at noon after the conclusion of the program. And the last event I'd like to let you know that's coming up is taking place in Wichita, Kansas, August 27th through the 28th. This is the Kansas Local Food Summit. Sessions are planned to be relevant to a wide range of different food systems interests, including food access, food waste and recovery, food hubs, community engagement, food policy, farm to school, and more. If you'd like to attend this event, if you get registered by August 5th, it's $40. However, after August 5th, it is $50. So just as a reminder for everything that will be linked in today's show notes. First will be a link if you'd like to learn more information about the Sorghum Connection partnership. After that will be a link to the K-State survey, which is asking for perspectives of cotton growers. That survey should take less than 10 minutes. After that will be a link to find out more information about the winter canola meetings. The first one taking place August 6th in Harper, Kansas, and the next one in Enid, Oklahoma on August 7th. Next is a link to the 2024 Kansas River Valley Experiment Field Day taking place Tuesday, August 13th at 5 p.m. Then after that will be a link to the field day, which is a 2024 East Central Experiment Field Day taking place Wednesday, August 21st at 9 a.m. And finally, wrapping up the links will be a link to the Kansas Local Food Summit, which is taking place in Wichita, Kansas, August 27th through the 28th. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you ahead.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. Establishing a more environmentally sustainable lawn is the focus for the August 7th K-State Garden Hour with Douglas County Extension Horticulture and Natural Resources Agent Dr. Sharon Ashworth. In advance of the webinar, she discusses the concept and benefits of reducing lawn care inputs, the water, herbicides, and fertilizers used on fescue lawns, and finding ways of replacing some or all of a fescue lawn with low-growing alternatives that support pollinators.
Sharon, I guess, first of all, this is one of the topics that keeps coming up. People are always looking for ways to cut down on the water they're using.
Yes, not only the water they're using, but oftentimes the fertilizer and all the inputs. And sometimes they're just tired of mowing.
I think we're all tired of mowing this time of year. In terms of what they can do, what are some of the tips that you're going to pass along?
Well, I'm going to take this in phases because it can be quite dramatic to just say, oh, I'm going to stop doing all this or get rid of this piece of lawn. So what I'm going to talk about is making your current lawn care more sustainable. So if you have a traditional tall fescue turf-type grass, what can you do to lower the inputs, the water, the fertilizer, and any of the chemicals that you use? And so we'll talk about that first, and then I'll talk about alternatives to that. So if you want even a lower input lawn, there are alternative turf grasses to consider and alternative ground covers to consider.
Is that one of the best things to do, is maybe just have less lawn to begin with?
Yes, that is one of the things you can do. If you want to maintain some traditional tall fescue turf type grass, but you want to make it more sustainable, the best thing to do is to grow it where it should be growing, meaning the conditions are conducive to growing that type of grass. That way you're not always fighting the weeds and the environmental conditions and struggling to get that grass growing. And usually when people struggle, they're throwing more fertilizers and pesticides and water at it. So if you can put it where it's conducive to growing that grass, you're going to be better off. So shrinking that lawn and allowing it to grow in places where it's able to will reduce your inputs.
So is this where then some of the natives come into play, that we can plant some more natives instead of using grass?
Yes. So there are a couple options there. Well, there's many different options for natives. But when you shrink down that turf-type lawn and you're planting garden beds into natives particularly, you're doing much more of a service to the pollinators and to the environment than you might be if you just let it grow. You've probably heard of the term no mow May. And what you're allowing there, if you just let your grass grow because you're tired of mowing and you're tired of putting water and fertilizer on it, you're really just allowing non-natives to grow, and that has some more benefit for pollinators, but not a great deal. You're better off keeping care of the lawn you have and then replacing some of that lawn with natives for the pollinators.
We often overlook pollinators. Explain why they're important.
Well, they are absolutely important for our ecosystems. When I talk about native plants, I'm talking about plants that have evolved in concert with other organisms in our area. Our pollinators that include our insects and our mammals and the ground. Even when we're talking about fungi and microorganisms in the soil, they have all evolved together to support the system, and that, of course, that ecosystem supports us. And so if we're talking about pollinators, we're talking quite directly about our food supply.
We just had a very brief discussion of what you're going to be covering. You'll have a long presentation coming up on August 7th, and how can people find that?
They can go to the K-State Garden Hour.
That's Douglas County Extension Horticulture and Natural Resources Agent, Dr. Sharon Ashworth. Again, to learn more about establishing a more environmentally sustainable lawn, listen to the K-State Garden Hour webinar on August 7th. You can find it by searching for K-State Garden Hour. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.